The Absinthe Trail, written by Ren Bryant, read by the author. I was seconds away from getting busy with my girlfriend Shelley when I heard it. The noise, a moaning, desperate cry that made us huddle together in our double-wide sleeping bag. We were camping along the Absinthe Trail in the French-speaking part of Switzerland, the birthplace of the highly alcoholic spirit. We had friends that moved to Zurich last year, and after a weekend with them, we wanted to hike and camp the rest of the country. Our pre-honeymoon, we called it. We were getting married next year. All was going great up until this point. I was hoping my girlfriend and I would get closer on the trip, but clutching each other in fear was not quite what I had in mind. I read all about absinthe when I was at George Washington University. I did a paper on prohibition and the legend of absinthe, and its still illegal status in the US. Van Gogh drank absinthe frequently, and that's what made him nuts. That's the legend anyways. The drink supposedly makes you hallucinate or go mental or something. They don't call it the Green Fairy or the Devil in a Green Bottle for nothing. The drink was banned pretty much everywhere up until fairly recently. Now places like Switzerland are using it as a tourism hook. We hiked for a day, grabbed a bottle of absinthe, and sat down in a wooded campground in the mountains above Lake Neuchâtel. I couldn't wait to try the drink. I was giddy, like a person arriving in Amsterdam who had never been stoned before. I hoped the drink would live up to the expectations I had for it. Sitting on some tree stumps, we slowly poured the green liquid over a spoon holding a sugar cube. The only way I was able to get it down was to add extra sugar to the drink. The alcohol slowly melted the sugar, and the drink became a hazy 120 proof potion that made the campfire dance. I knew I should have sipped my first glass, but it was just so damn awful tasting that I chugged it like a shot. I winced as it burned the shit out of my throat and then my stomach. Within minutes, I felt tingly and lightheaded. "You're gonna kill yourself doing it like that," Shelley warned. She sipped it slow like you were supposed to. Shelley and I finished half a bottle by the time the sun went down. I gotta be honest, the taste was nasty. If you like licorice, then maybe you'll be fine, but me, I hate that stuff. I didn't hallucinate, but with the alcohol, our conversation flowed. So we drank more. Our voices grew louder and more animated. We joked and laughed about our trip so far and the amount of cheese we've eaten. We talked about our future together. We sat side by side as the Green Fairy wormed its way through our veins. We got touchy-feely as the darkness consumed the forest around us. My head was spinning and Shelley was a bit stumbly by the time we decided to call it a night. We let the fire burn to embers and ass-grabbed our way back to the tent for some naked fun. She brought me to attention, and then... Shelley grabbed me tight. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. How could I not? It wasn't an animal sound. It wasn't a growl. It was a ghostly female voice. It sounded close, too, just outside the tent. "Yeah," I whispered back. My erection now faded to flaccidness. "What was it?" she asked. Her breath tickled my ear. I didn't answer, just listened and stared into the blackness of our tent. Shelley squeezed me so much it hurt my ribs. The voice sounded morose, mournful, or maybe... I jerked away from Shelley, startled. Shelley reacted with a scream. "Sorry," I whispered and reached my hands out to find her again, hugging her. Shelley was shaking in fear. "What was that about?" she asked. I thought I saw something in our tent. That's why I jumped, but I shook my head and it went away. The absinthe was playing tricks on me. The pitch blackness of our tent was playing tricks on me too. But I didn't tell Shelley that. Instead I said, I felt a bug on me. The voice again, and then, "Come. You heard that, right?" she whispered. How could I not? A haunted voice outside our tent asking us to come. It was unmistakable. I told Shelley I was going to go check it out. "No, don't," she commanded. But "What if someone needs our help?" I said. "Stay put, I'll be right back." "There's no way in hell I'm staying in this tent by myself," she told me. I unzipped the tent to stick my head out. I looked left and right but didn't see anything. So I stepped outside, my knees a bit shaky both from fright and from the absinthe. "Hello?" I shouted. There was nothing, no response, no voice for help, nothing but blackness of midnight all around us. I walked a few steps and realized Shelley detached from me. I turned to look for her but didn't see her. She could have been right there, but it was so dark I couldn't see a thing. I thought maybe she went back to the tent. I froze. Any heat from the alcohol in my belly turned to ice. "Shelley, you hear that?" No response from Shelley. I tiptoed back to the tent, but Shelley wasn't there. I ducked my head out again and looked towards the sound of the voice. There it was, what I saw in the tent. It was a ghost, glowing in the woods, a white specter. It was a young woman with raggedy clothes and even more raggedy hair. She was floating in the air, her arms outstretched, welcoming me. No, actually, I think she wanted help. She was asking for help. "Shelley, where are you?" I walked towards the ghost, thinking Shelley must be there too. She had to see what I was seeing. She must have gone there to help it. I was scared as can be, but I had to find Shelley. As I got closer to the ghost, its glow lit the trees around her, casting the woods in a pale glow. "Oh my God, Shelley!" I stumbled as I sprinted. Shelley, she was wrapped into one of the trees. Branches covered her body, holding her against her will against its trunk. They poked her, stabbed at her. The tree was alive, and it was attacking Shelley. The ghost's moan sounded more ominous. It wasn't a call for help. It was one of those sirens from a Greek myth, its voice calling us to our death. "Shelley!" She was non-responsive when I got to the tree. I yanked as hard as I could against the branches, but I wasn't strong enough. I pulled her hands, her legs, any bit of flesh I could, but nothing could pry her from the tree. It wrapped its arms around me, and then I woke up naked on the forest floor. Leaves and debris stuck to my body. Dirt and blood covered my skin. I had scratches on my arms and face. My head felt like somebody whacked it with a sledgehammer. I had no idea why I was beat up looking and had blood on me. I had no idea why I was naked outside. I shook my head and tried to clear the cobwebs. I tried to remember last night. I remember drinking by the fire. I remember about to have sex, but after that, things get a little fuzzy. I think I had a messed up dream about a ghost, but maybe I went outside to take a leak and passed out. I couldn't figure it out. I looked behind me and saw our tent. The door was unzippered. Inside was our sleeping bag, but no Shelley. "Shelley!" I called out and scanned the perimeter. Oh my God. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. My pulse quickened and banged against my temples. Now I really felt sick, and not just hangover sick. A good 30 yards away was Shelley, covered in her own blood, branches sticking out of her chest and belly. She was lifeless. It was the most horribly revolting sight I had ever seen. I tried to get up to walk over to her, but my legs couldn't support my weight. I fell back to the dirt, crashing hard on my ass. I looked at my feet and saw it, the empty absinthe bottle. The Antenna, written by Ren Bryant, read by the author. It was there in the forest, disguised as a tree, sort of like they do at cell phone towers, trying to make something foreign seem not so out of place. The best we could figure is that it was an antenna of some sort. It didn't look like anything we saw before. Though it was camouflage with fake tree limbs hanging off of it, there was no mistaking that this thing was not like its natural neighbors. As we got closer, we could see the antenna was made of some sort of metal, maybe steel. It was hard to tell. It was tubular and dull silver in color. 3 legs met up to a singular point at the top, like a Christmas tree. The tip was slightly higher than the surrounding pine trees, poking out of the top like a spear. Matt and I first discovered it when we were training for the Vermont 180. That's the big ultra marathon that takes place every year. It runs all of Vermont, south to north. You start near Vernon, just north of Satan's Kingdom, Massachusetts, and run through the Green Mountain State until you hit the Derby line near Canada. It's a brutal race and most don't make it to the finish line. Matt and I didn't make it when we first ran it last year. We were running just north of the Groton State Forest when we first came across it. It was a remote part of Vermont that most people had no business being in. This was the section of the state that did us in last year, so we were focusing on correcting our weakness. As we got closer, the signal from the tower messed up our Bluetooth headphone connection. We didn't think much about it, figuring that it was maybe an old radio tower whose signal was interfering with our reception. We kept running, and as we got further away, our Bluetooth connection came back. Soon after that run, Matt started getting headaches, really debilitating ones that kept him in bed. He never had headaches before. In fact, he was always in perfect health. Healthier than me and the constant aches I got when I turned 35. His doctor found nothing wrong and said maybe lay off some of the running for a while. He also reminded him to stay hydrated. He said that's especially important for distance running. Of course, Matt knew everything about hydration. All runners do. Matt took an extra week off and we resumed training as soon as the headaches went away. We returned again to the Groton State Forest area, running a single-lane trail through the trees, going up and down mountains, past cliffs, bogs, swamps, and lakes. And the antenna. This time we got right next to the strange hulking tower. As we ran next to its dull silver base, Matt immediately doubled over and covered his ears. "You don't hear that?" he screamed at me. "I can't hear myself talk. All I hear is a dentist drill and 20 people talking at the same time. No, it's a clicking. It's like a bunch of people making clicking noises. My whole brain feels like it's rattling." I grabbed Matt under the arms as best I could and kept us moving. As we got a bit further away from the tower, the noises in his head stopped and he regained his composure. We sat for a bit on a fallen tree and took a water break. We also got some carbs in. "Thanks, Brad," he said. "That was effing weird, dude. My head still hurts a bit. It's a dull throbbing now. Not quite a headache, but, there's definitely something going on. But I don't hear the noises. No drilling, no clicking." "What do you think it was?" I asked. "Maybe it was related to what happened before?" He shrugged. "You think it could be that thing?" I pointed back to the antenna. "I mean, that's the only thing around. It messed with our Bluetooth, and that's when you kind of went down." Matt shrugged again. "But you're fine," he said. "You're not getting headaches or hearing shit." "Well, only one way to find out," I said. "You up for heading back towards the antenna? But if anything happens, we're out of here. I mean, straight to the car." Matt rubbed his temples and thought it over. "Fine," he said. "But if I go down again, we ain't coming back this way, ever." I agreed and we headed out, back up the mountain, back to the antenna. As we jogged carefully over the loose gravel going through the trees, my mind wandered, as it often did during our runs. I wondered what the antenna was doing in the middle of nowhere. It wasn't a cell phone tower, and there aren't any radio stations in this part of Vermont. The ones you get are either out of Burlington or floating all the way from New Hampshire or somewhere further away. There's no military presence in this area either, so that couldn't have been it. It was just so out of place, but it was put there, deliberately. Why? By whom? As we got about a football field away, we slowed our jog to a walk. If you were casually walking by, you probably wouldn't even notice the fake tree branches covering metal posts. Not unless the sunlight made it through the tree canopy and bounced off the metal, making a glare. But in these thick forests, that didn't happen much. We approached the antenna cautiously, taking slow steps as if we were walking down a wedding aisle. Matt seemed very leery, and I saw him wincing as we got closer. A good Tom Brady throw away, Matt stopped and covered his ears. "You okay?" I asked. He looked towards the sky, towards the tip of the antenna. "Yep," he said, "just making sure I didn't hear anything yet." "We can go back," I reminded him. "No, I want to see what the heck's going on with me. Let's see if it's this antenna that's causing my issues." We were now about spitting distance away. I kept my eyes focused on Matt, not on the trail ahead of me. He seemed like he was in so much pain last time when the drilling noises started. I didn't want to see him get hurt or permanently damaged or anything. I shouldn't even have suggested we go back to this antenna. We should have gone to our car, gone to see a doctor again. "Oh shit!" I tripped over a rock and went to the ground. It wasn't the most graceful of falls since I was looking at Matt instead of where I was going, but I managed to roll onto my side and protect my head. Not like that trip and fall last year where I bloodied my mouth. I looked up to where I last saw Matt standing. I was surprised he didn't come to my aid when I fell. He wasn't there. I dusted myself off and looked around. Matt was huddled at the base of a pine tree, curled up in a fetal position. He was rocking back and forth, holding his knees to his chest. "Matt! Matt, what happened?" I ran over to him. He didn't respond. As I got closer, I froze. Matt's face looked different. I'd seen him at his absolute worst after an ultramarathon, but this was something else entirely. He was changing. His face was gaunt and pale, ashen. I'd say he was sickly, but that doesn't quite cover it. His entire face seemed thinner, more elongated. His cheeks went inward, as if he was sucking too hard through a straw. And his eyes, they seemed bigger too. And they were looking right at me. Not blinking, just staring with pupils that took up all the white space. Matt, what the hell?" I wanted to help, but I didn't dare get closer. "The voices!" he cried out. "I hear them all! My brothers and sisters, they're coming! Soon we'll all be one!" I didn't understand what he was saying. It sounded so random, gibberish. I thought maybe he was having a stroke or hit his head, so I pulled out my phone to dial 911. There was no reception. Matt continued rocking back and forth, babbling. "Oh yes, we'll all be here soon. It will be a new place for us, a new home, with lots of food. 7 billion, enough for all." I really wanted to help Matt, but I didn't dare do it, not with what I was seeing before me. The changes came on rapidly. His head doubled in size, becoming oblong, the size of a giant watermelon. A watermelon with giant alien eyes. And no nose. Matt no longer had a nose. It disappeared completely. Only 2 holes remained. His mouth grew ear to ear and was full of razor-sharp teeth. His body also grew, making the clothes he was wearing rip and fall to the forest floor. Instead of a bulky muscle to support such a big head, he was literally skin and bones. Ashen gray skin that looked crusty and hairless. "Lots of food," he snarled, drool dripping from the corners of his mouth. He lunged at me, his mouth wide, his bony fingers nearly grabbing the straps in my camelback. I stumbled backwards, falling to the ground. I scooted on my butt, my hands searched through fallen leaves and pine needles for a branch. I had nothing to defend myself with, and I wasn't sure I could outrun the beast. Matt, or whatever this creature was before me, crawled on all fours, slowly stalking me as I begged off. Its mouth snapped, showing me it meant business, showing me it could snap me in half without much effort. "Matt," I pleaded, hoping he was somewhere inside, able to control what he had become. "It's me, Brad. This is not you. I don't know what's wrong with you, but there's something definitely wrong." My hands kept searching the forest floor as I talked, and I was trying to buy myself more time to find something I could use as a weapon. "We can get you help. Matt, you need to control yourself. I tossed a medium-sized stick I found towards the creature. I followed that up with a fistful of dirt and pine needles and other debris. Direct hit, right into his giant eyes. The creature stood on 2 legs and let out a cry. I used a distraction to run as fast as I could. My heart felt like it would jump through my chest. My wristwatch vibrated, indicating my heart rate was above the maximum safe range. We had run this section of Vermont so many times I was able to go off-piste, cutting through trees and jumping over boulders, flying down the mountainside to Stark Pond where my car was parked. I wasn't sure whether there was any of Matt even left inside that alien monster. I had hoped not. With any luck, the creature wouldn't know its right from its left and wouldn't be able to follow. But if it was Matt's brain still working inside, then it would know exactly where I was parked and go after me. I heard a high-pitched cry from behind me. It was a whine followed by a clicking noise. It must have been what Matt heard inside his head, the thing that made him double over and grab his ears. It sounded awful. I moved faster, feeling like my feet never even touched the ground. I was going so quickly. As I neared the bottom of the mountain with nothing but grassland in front of me, I looked back. I didn't see anything. Nothing moved in the forest, no cries either. I thought I might be safe, but I didn't dare stop for longer. I kept running all the way to my car, where I jumped in, locked the doors, and peeled out, sending dirt flying as I peeled off onto State Forest Road. My Subaru shook as I kept the pedal to the metal. I fumbled with the map app on my phone to find the nearest police station. There was a constable in Groton, but one man in a two-man town wouldn't be of any use, not to this beast. I found a state police station in St. Johnsbury, so I swung a U-turn and headed north. My pulse calmed as I drove and rational thought came back to me. Just what in the hell happened back there? What happened to Matt? And what was it with that tower, that antenna? Was that what did it to him? Was it some sort of signal that made him transform? Is Matt even alive? Because what I saw wasn't Matt. That was some alien monster. As I pulled into the police station, I wondered what I would tell them. I couldn't say something about a monster without getting laughed at or them checking me for drugs. Instead, I decided to report a missing person. I told them I'd been running with my friend and he got separated and lost in the woods. I gave them the coordinates of the antenna and asked what that thing was for. They said they didn't know anything about an antenna in the woods. We had no reason to go over that way, I was told. They said they would send a patrol car to check it out and let me know if they find anything. I grabbed some Jack Daniels on the way home. I needed to calm my nerves. I also reached out to the Vermont 180 organizers. I told them the trail wasn't safe. I said there was a rabid wild animal in the woods in Groton State Forest. They said it's all been inspected and fine. Plus, they said it's too late to cancel the race. It happens in 2 weeks. I went on the message boards and tried to warn racers too. I said the same thing. Big animal, big teeth, violent, beware. They all laughed at me online and they said I was trying to scare them so I could win the big prize. With Matt still missing, I was left dejected. I never heard anything more from the police. My friend was lost. And that strange antenna, that had something to do with it. I knew it. I went back into the woods after a week had gone by, after I got my courage back. Unfortunately, I didn't see or hear anything. I brought some homemade warning signs with me. It was the only thing I thought I could do to help. In a few days, hundreds of runners would go through this area. I feared some wouldn't come out alive. I feared some would also be transformed, like my poor friend Matt. Cannibals for Christ, written by Ren Bryant, read by the author. I still don't know if I believe it was real. It seemed like something out of one of those 80s Italian horror movies. Blood and guts everywhere, literally. Amazonian tribal cannibals who hung intestines around their forest camp like Christmas lights. The wicked plot against the righteous and gnash their teeth at them. That's what the Bible says. I was on a missionary trip to the Brazilian Amazon, me and Pete proselytizing for the church. We were deep in the jungle, converting native tribes to Christ. I was uneasy with the trip from the start. My friends went off to great capitals of Europe or to California or places where they could have fun on their downtime. I had nothing to do on my downtime. I was stuck with insects the size of cats, crazy animals hooting and hollering. Especially at night, I had a hard time sleeping because of all the animal noises. Oppressive humidity that made me constantly sweat. And everywhere I looked, there were more plants and trees than I ever thought possible in one place. Don't get me wrong, it was cool being in the rainforest. It was an exotic place that most people will never go to. So for that, I was thankful. But I would have done anything to be sitting on the beach, not slathering DEET on my skin 5 times an hour. I knew we were in deep trouble when I saw those intestines lining the perimeter of the village. At first, I didn't know what they were. It looked like rope, but as I got closer, I could see it was slimy and wrinkly. It was clear they were guts. I thought maybe it was from a wild boar or some other animal. I never would have thought they were human, not until what I saw happened to Pete. For the past 5 days, a guide had taken us deeper into the jungle by boat. We stopped along the way when we saw natives. We gave them a Bible, told them about the glories of Christ, and asked them to be baptized in His name. Up until that point, we struck out, though our church gave us some Portuguese lessons ahead of time to help us integrate with the locals. The natives spoke their own language, and they couldn't read, so the Bibles were useless. And they carried sticks, big sharp sticks they used to chase us back to the boat with. We asked our guide if there were any bigger communities we could go to. Both Pete and I were sick of putting around on that rickety boat, barely bigger than a canoe. We were tired of seeing a native here or a native there, stopping, talking, getting chased away. It was draining and hard to keep the faith when we were striking out like we were. We wanted a place we can go camp, maybe integrate a bit better. We thought if the natives could get to know us better, that might help us convert them to Christ. Plus, neither Pete nor I could take another day on the water. Our guide told us about one place. He said there was a community that was a day's walk through the jungle. He told us he can give us a machete and point us to the direction of the village, but he wouldn't be joining us. Though we protested and said we needed him, he said he couldn't leave his boat. Thinking about it, he did look very uneasy telling us about the village. Scared even. I should have picked up on the warning sign. "Pete, this is bad news. I'm not sure we should be here," I said, pointing to the intestine fence. We were huddled near a fern the size of a VW bug, out of sight from the natives. From what we could tell, there were about 20 of them. Men, women, children of all ages, gathered around a fire. "Yeah, well, it's getting dark," Pete said, motioning with his chin skyward. "I don't think we have much choice. I mean, we can't go back to the boat, not at night. We'll get eaten by a jaguar or something, or get lost. Plus, remember, Christ has brought us here. Remember our mission." "But this," I said again, pointing to the guts. "It's probably to keep the animals away," Pete explained. "You know, throw off the human scent." It seemed reasonable at the time, so after a quick prayer, we entered the village with our hands waving a friendly hello. Oh dear God, how I wish we didn't step foot in that village. We were immediately greeted by shouting and sharp spear tips held by sinewy men in loincloths. The women and children ran into their huts, screaming in terror. Though we couldn't make out their native words, the spear told us all we needed to know. Hands up. We introduced ourselves, speaking slowly in both Portuguese and English. We had to make sure they understood we meant no harm. We were no threat. As we spoke, one of the native men searched us for weapons. He took our backpack and tossed the contents out onto the jungle floor. The shiny golden crucifix showing Jesus nailed to the cross got his attention. He held it up, speaking native words, showing it to others. "That's Jesus," I said. "Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior." I repeated the words in Portuguese. I don't know if they recognized what I said or if it was just the way the gold plating of the crucifix shined in the fire, but they huddled around it, passing it from one person to the next, inspecting it. They lowered their spears. We were okay. We sat on a rock near the fire as the women and children slowly came out of their huts. They stared at Pete and me as if we were aliens, white devils. The men continued to inspect the crucifix. The one who I guessed was their chief said some words to us, but I didn't understand. He held up the crucifix, jabbing it at us. I tried again to explain what it was and why we were here. I used the script my church had given me. I told them Christ had died for our sins. His blood atones. I quoted from Matthew 26 and told the natives about the Last Supper, how Jesus said, "Take it and eat it, for this is my body, and drink from it, for this is my blood, which seals the covenant between God and his people." The native chief nodded as I spoke these words. He seemed to understand. Then he turned to his people, holding up the crucifix, speaking in his native tongue. I assumed he repeated what I had told him. His people all whooped and looked happy when he spoke. I couldn't believe it. Our mission was actually a success. We were converting an entire village. That night, Pete and I slept in what seemed like their best hut. It was lined with animal skins and a bed made of tree trunks and leaves. It wasn't the most comfortable, but we felt welcome. The only thing that gave us a chill were the bones hanging overhead, a skeleton mobile. We fell asleep to a pelvis, ribs, femur, jawbones, and cranium dancing in the jungle breeze. The next morning we awoke to the sound of chopping outside our hut. I poked my head outside the entry flap and saw a full-size crucifix being assembled from 2 tree trunks. The natives were lashing it together. Another was sharpening stakes, similar to the ones in the golden crucifix they admired. Pete, I whispered. Come check this out. Pete poked his head out and told me it was great. He said I really got through to them last night, a total success. Today we can baptize them in the river. He barely got those words out before the natives grabbed him and dragged him out of the hut. It was the last words he said to me. Pete struggled against the 2 men who pulled him towards the cross, but he couldn't break free. They had his arms tight and another held a spear to his chin. I shrunk to the back of the hut, fearful they would take me next. There was lots of commotion outside, lots of natives yelling and what sounded like orders being given. Pete screamed a bunch of times and then I heard it. The pounding, the hammering, Pete shrieking. It was horrible, blood-curdling. I didn't dare look, but I knew what was happening. They were crucifying Pete. I knew I'd be next, so I searched the back of the hut for an exit. I had to escape and get as far away as I could. Get back to the river, back to the boat. I found a part of the hut that was loose and slid on my stomach to the outside. I tried to be as quiet as I could, though it probably didn't matter since Pete's screams echoed through the jungle. When I found a safe location, I hid and looked back. There, I saw it. Pete, his limp body hanging off a crude cross. They nailed him just like they nailed Jesus. The tribal chief took his spear and pierced Pete's side. The holy lance, I thought. But the chief didn't stop there. He took that spear and cut downward, splaying Pete, making his guts fall to the jungle floor. The women and children rushed in and grabbed his bloody intestines. They gnawed and chewed away, eating Pete's innards like candy. Though I had nothing in my belly, I vomited at the sight. It was the most vile and revolting thing I had ever seen. My poor friend. Pete didn't deserve this. I had been on the run ever since. It had been 2 days now. I can hear the natives close sometimes. I can hear them talking and whacking the jungle foliage, searching for me. I thought I could make it to the river, but I'm totally lost. I know it's only a matter of time before I'm crucified and eaten like Pete was. I don't think I'll make it out alive, so I'm writing this as my last will and testament. To whomever may see this note, please tell our story to the Lord's Church in Mount Pleasant, Utah. Get my message to our church elders so they can let our parents know. And please tell them to stay away from the Amazon. May God have mercy on us all. Davy Johnson from Mount Pleasant, Utah, United States of America.